Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on October 3rd, 2020, and is current through the Star Trek Lower Decks episode Crisis Point, so beware of spoilers. Though, given Lower Decks is only available in North America right now, I will be noting in the episode description the time codes for any Lower Decks discussions, so you can skip over it if you choose. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 6 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is Abby Sommer. Abby, welcome to WeeklyTrek.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
All right, Abby, well, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you feeling excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Well, I have to say that I am counting down the days until Discovery comes back.
Aha!
I'm a huge fan. I've converted some new friends to loving Star Trek because of Discovery, and it's been a long break. And I understand that the world has thrown some monkey wrenches into everything, but I am ready to see my old friends, meet new friends, and see what all of this speculation and all of this time travel comes to.
Well, we are now only, as of the day of recording, 12 days away from the release of Discovery Season 3. By the time folks are listening to this, we will be 11 days away from the premiere. We only have the season finale of Lower Decks standing between us and Discovery Season 3. What do you think you are most looking forward to for the 3rd season of Discovery?
I'm really excited that we're going to a time period where we haven't seen anything yet. And there's no worries about canon or about conflicts. It is an absolutely blank slate to start some really cool new ideas and to jump that one step forward into the future where we can see even more of what the Federation has become or fallen apart into. And I think it's going to be neat because Discovery, where it had been set, based back more towards the original series, you saw a lot of the technology that was based off of what it was in the 60s. And now here we are so many decades later, and they are jumping centuries ahead. So we can see some of the tech that's based on what we know and see now. And I'm excited to see where that jumps and where all those people who think creatively and technologically can put us for the future.
Yeah, it really does sort of allow the production to sort of, let their imagination run wild a little bit because, we sort of are getting into, in a way that setting a show in the 23rd century was never going to have a massive amount of new speculative technology behind it, right? All that was new speculative technology in the 1960s when the original series was set, computers and warp drive and tractor beams and, all this, that, and the other. But today we're sort of playing within that sandbox. But now, Discovery moving so far into the future allows the production to sort of come up with their own speculative technology that fits within the world of Star Trek because you're so far out into the future that you can have, some of these sort of technological advancements and they don't feel wrong for the world. I mean, I know that lots of people were very kind of put off by the holographic communications in Discovery Season 1. I think that's something that fits very well in a Discovery Season 3 environment. Of course, there would be, sort of real-time holographic communication that far out into the future. And so, again, at that point, it's something that fits very well. So they do sort of really get to play a little bit more than they have. And in some ways, sort of, invent some new science fiction concepts of their own. And I'm excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah, and sometimes you see real life trying to imitate what Star Trek imagined. So I'm kind of excited to see where in the next 10, 15, 20 years, the things that these creators imagine, and then people go, ooh, maybe we could do that for real and work towards that too, which will be fun to see if that happens again.
Absolutely. Well, the thing I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week, well, it's fun because we talk about Discovery, and now let's look back a little bit and talk about Lower Decks. I actually loved this week's most recent episode of Lower Decks, Crisis Point. which was just such a fun spoof of the 13 Star Trek movies. And there's one scene in particular that I think has become my favorite scene of the show to date, because I think it's the funniest scene in the show to date. And that is the send up of the approaching the Enterprise scene from Star Trek the Motion Picture. I mean, it was, so they're on the shuttle and they're at Douglas Station and the shuttle is approaching the Cerritos and it's doing all the same things it did in the motion picture, sort of spinning around it, and the crew on board are, very sort of taken by seeing the ship. And the scene it probably goes on about 20 seconds.
Longer than feels comfortable.
Exactly. And you start feeling just a little bit uncomfortable. And then there's this one shot overhead of the Cerritos where it's the Cerritos and the camera's just spinning around and around and around, and the music is swelling and swelling and swelling. And I just thought it was just that scene is, in the motion picture, is an incredible scene. And it's one that obviously, resonated massively for audiences when they first saw the movie. As time has gone on, it's one that has been lampooned. And I think, the scene in this episode is one that kind of both treats the source material with the reverence that it deserves, while also poking the fun at it that everybody else, kind of does too, in a very loving way. And I think, that has been an encapsulation of Lower Decks' approach to Star Trek as a whole. And so I thought it was just delightful.
I absolutely agree. That has been my favorite part about Lower Decks, is how they obviously have such a deep love and respect and get so much joy from Star Trek as a whole, but they're not above realizing that some of it can be a little silly or overdone or cliche at times. And the balance that they have struck with that is absolutely phenomenal, because I watch with my husband, who's a much more casual fan of Star Trek than I am, and he enjoys them. But I'm over there hooting and hollering and laughing and snorting, and he's just looking at me shaking his head. And he's like, how do you like this if it's making fun of your favorite thing? And I'm like, because it's making fun of my favorite thing. Right. It's great.
In a way that shows that it loves it and isn't, it's not mean-spirited in any way.
Exactly. It's a love letter to all of us on the Deep Cut crew.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
In a wide-ranging interview with TrekMovie.com, Jonathan Frakes talked about the upcoming season of Star Trek Picard and the expectations about a possible return to shooting. Despite a recent deal between the unions in Hollywood and the studios about safety protocols for a return to shooting in California, Frakes indicates that Picard is not currently scheduled to return before the camera until January of next year, nearly 6 months after it had been scheduled to do so prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. In the interview, Frakes discusses how Sir Patrick Stewart, despite his insistence that any return to shooting be done so with the utmost safety for cast and crew in mind, is eager for a return to production. He's also dying to get back at it, Frakes said in an interview. He's not a fragile man. He's 80, but he's fit and he's healthy and he's hardworking and he's got energy and is used to working. However, despite already being slated to direct for Picard's second season, Frakes says he has no knowledge about the season's story or if the Riker family will return. I have to wonder if that's true or not, or if he's just saying that for the purposes of the interview. In addition to talking about Picard, Frakes also spoke about his turn on Discovery this season, indicating that he directed 3 episodes, including the reunion episode for Burnham and the crew of the Discovery. The interview does range a little into spoilers. It's typical for Frakes. He sort of gives away, I think, a little more than he's probably supposed to. And in that interview, he does kind of frame out the first 3 episodes of the season and how they're set up. So I will not describe those details to you now, because that is very clearly, I think, a spoiler. So I'll just say, if you are interested in some details about the sort of basic structure of the first 3 episodes of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, you can head on over to TrekMovie.com and check it out if you're interested. Abby, let's focus on Star Trek Picard, though please feel free to talk about Discovery if you want to. But are you excited for the prospect of a return to filming for Picard Season 2?
Absolutely. I adored the direction that it went in. I felt like it struck a wonderful balance of nostalgia and pushing Picard's story forward. And you're left with a satisfying Season 1 ending, but so many loose threads that need to be tied up that I'm ready to see where the story goes next. But I also have to say, I completely agree. Patrick Stewart is a treasure to the world, and we must keep him safe above all else. So if that means I have to wait a little longer in order for it to be sure to be safe, and we see how some other shows do before we put him out there, I can temper my patience for that, because losing him will be a blow to the universe.
Yeah, I mean, we've been reminded, just yesterday and today that, nobody is immune from this virus, and it's not over. And even, the sort of best safety protocols and mechanisms in the world still won't necessarily protect you from infection. And so, I think it is right that they have sort of been taking it, a very slow and measured approach to a return to production. In some ways, as you say, I am pleased that the season did not end on a cliffhanger. Obviously there are a ton of new questions that the end of the season throws up, but it's also, to my mind, the case that, and of course this won't happen, but were it the case that Star Trek Picard were just to be a one and done, that it does actually tell a complete story, and you don't necessarily need more episodes in order to finish the story they've told. They have sort of set up a new story that they're moving on to in season 2. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to them getting back to production. I really enjoyed Star Trek Picard season 1. I'm really looking forward to Star Trek Picard season 2. But again, I think, it's the kind of thing that has to be done safely. But, and I'll just toot my own horn a little bit, I did say my prediction at the end of the last episode, I had this theory about a return to Picard season 2 filming being on the books. And it sounds like it is on the books for January. So we'll just have to see how things go in the world over the next 3 months as to whether that ultimately materializes or not, or they decide to push it back further. But exciting that it sounds like they are circling in around a date, and that we can look forward to Star Trek Picard back on our screens, perhaps not in the very near future, but at some point in 2021.
Exactly. And on a different note with this interview, I have to say, when you read any interview with Frakes, you hear it in his voice. It is just so much fun to read, and you scroll through so much more than you normally would because you're hearing him say it, and it's just such a fun thing. And there was a little blurb in here talking about how he was making pizza, and if Riker comes back again, do we think he'll be in Starfleet, or will he be cooking in the woods again? And it went off on that for a little bit, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, he was cooking in the woods, and bunny corn pizza was fantastic and probably one of my favorite memes of the entire year. But I could also see them bringing back some of Riker's other hobbies one way or another. I mean, if they end up back on Nepenthe, trombone could come out.
Oh yes, let's get out the bone.
And I think he's up for and willing for just about anything that they throw at him, as long as it feels in character. But he's such a part of the Star Trek family, in front of and behind the camera, that they would really make sure that he's comfortable and feels like this was something that Riker would actually do. And I'm dying to see him and Troy and Kestra back together, because that was one of the balms to my soul in this past year, was seeing them as a family.
Yes. I mean, Nepenthe was, in my opinion, the best episode of the season. And it was so great to see Frakes and Marina back. And, Frakes is something of a treasure for the franchise. I mean, he directs, now he acts, he's sort of everywhere. He always seems to be open to talking to fans or doing interviews. So he really is a fabulous voice for the franchise as a whole.
Exactly. And I can't wait to see the episodes of Discovery that he directed, because when he's directed previously on Discovery, I feel like the camera work and all of the direction he gives to those episodes just make them feel like you get absorbed in the episode a little more than the other directors, because I think he understands both sides of the filming, from a technical aspect and from understanding how all the screens and the CGI and all that is going to be put in later. He can do camera angles and shots that really make the actors and the backgrounds shine, so you get absorbed into it.
Well, we know that Kenneth Mitchell, beloved Star Trek Discovery actor who has been fighting ALS, will be appearing in Discovery Season 3, but fans were surprised watching a recent episode of Star Trek Lower Decks that he had also offered his voice talents there too. In an interview with Ryan Britt at Sci-Fi Wire, Mitchell talked about how recording his voice role on Lower Decks is the last time he can remember walking unassisted. He said, "Working on Lower Decks is the last time I remember walking before having to be in a motorized wheelchair. I remember walking up the stairs to go into the studio and the recording booth. I remember having a great time with Mike McMahon and the team. And then I remember walking down the stairs but having trouble getting down. But to be honest, that's my last memory of walking on my own. And for that to be the last memory, it's pretty damn special." For his Discovery Season 3 role, in which he is playing a human, Mitchell said he was sad not to get to spend time with the prosthetics department as he had for the first 2 seasons, but did not begrudge begrudge the extra sleep each morning before work. For the new character in Discovery Season 3, he said, I work a lot with Mario Moreira, the props department, and the special effects department, so you can interpolate that as much as you want. I'll just say it's pretty damn cool and very unique and something Star Trek hasn't had a lot of. I think it was special they adapted this part for me. I think it will be meaningful to the Trek community and beyond. Mitchell also says he's been spending a lot of time with Anson Mount and Ethan Peck from Star Trek Strange New Worlds and wouldn't rule out a possible appearance on the show. Abby, were you as surprised as I was to hear the voice of Kenneth Mitchell in Star Trek Lower Decks?
I was, and that was one of the moments that got a little squeal from me, and I went, ooh, because I really think that he has been such a fabulous addition to this franchise. And with his voice, with his acting, with his willingness to be in and out of prosthetics, what a gem. And every time I hear him speak, his voice is so distinctive, but it carries so much emotion behind it. Whether he's a human, a Klingon himself, he is a powerful speaker. And so he was a perfect addition to the Lower Deck. Loved it.
Yeah, I mean, what a trooper. This guy gets diagnosed with ALS, which is, ultimately a terminal condition. And I believe now that was, about 2 years ago, he received that diagnosis, and he is still working and still going. And he's going to be in Discovery Season 3, and he was in Lower Deck Season 1. And he's talking about the potential for Strange New Worlds Season 1. I mean, there's just, so much sort of vibrant life in this guy. And, he's a true inspiration to everybody, I think.
I agree. And when you hear him speak, there's plenty of videos out there of him talking about his diagnosis and about the Star Trek family and about how it's helping him pull through and see that optimism. And the last time I watched something with him, I actually got teared up. He was talking about spending extra time during COVID with his family and seeing it as a big thank you from the universe to give him this extra time where he had time to just be at home with his family, knowing that his time is limited. The man is amazing. And even though we know he is probably not around for decades, let's take every minute we have and celebrate him.
Absolutely. I mean, he certainly seems to be wasting no time, that's for sure.
Good. I hope he's on everything we can possibly get him in for as long as possible. He is just a beacon of joy.
Well, after first being teased at virtual San Diego Comic-Con in July, Simon and Schuster have now formally announced 2 new Star Trek novels for 2021, and both novels are written by newcomer authors to Star Trek. Star Trek The Next Generation, Shadows Have Offended by Cassandra Rose Clark, will be set during the run of the series and feature starring roles for Counselor Troy and Dr. Crusher. Meanwhile, Star Trek Deep Space Nine Revenant by Alex R. White will prominently feature Jadzia Dax and Kira Nerys. We don't know for sure, but we are expecting that this novel will also be set during the run of Deep Space Nine, marking it as the first novel to be set during the series' production in over 2 decades. The TNG novel Shadows Have Offended will release in April of next year, with Revenant expected to debut later. Abby, are you a Star Trek books reader? And if so, do you think you'll be picking up either of these novels?
I am a book reader. I grew up reading every single Star Trek book I could get my hands on. And as a young girl in the 90s, the female characters on Star Trek were role models for me and inspirations for me. So I am absolutely pumped that we are getting 2 new books that are focusing on the female members of these crews that were my comfort escape places when I was growing up. And at least one of them for sure is set in that time period. So this is just like, opening the book and sitting in a warm bath and having a blanket wrapped around you. They're going to be fantastic. I can't wait for this. Though I think they lost a bit of an opportunity not putting one out in March for Women's History Month because, future history. And focusing on the women that we love so much in Trek.
Yeah, this is an exciting move for the Star Trek novels. It's funny you talk about having devoured all of those novels in the 90s. In some ways, this feels a little bit like a return to the 90s because, that's when we were getting these sort of in-series set novels. By the time you get to the 2000s, the books had sort of moved beyond the events of the shows, either into the sort of relaunches where they kind of told stories that went beyond the last time we saw the crews, or in in the Next Generation's case, into the movie era and then into their own relaunch. So it's really interesting to see them return to the shows, and it's really interesting to see them return and do a Deep Space Nine book. I think when earlier this year, some of the authors had kind of been scoping out for us what their expectations were for the book line moving forward, it was, that because they've moved to trade paperbacks, they probably were going to be a bit less than 12 a year, which we'd had for the last kind of 10 years at this point. And that, rather than being this sort of diverse range of lines, they were probably going to focus on some of their core bestsellers, which includes TOS books. And we've had a number of TOS books, TNG books, and we've had, several TNG books. And then the books that directly tie into the shows that are on the air right now, like the Discovery novels, which they're now on their 7th. And we know there's an additional one on the way from John Jackson Miller at some point. And then the first Picard novel, which came out earlier this year. So, I think there was a fear as part of that, maybe that was going to be it, right? You were going to get TOS, TNG, Picard, Discovery, and maybe some Strange New Worlds books down the line. But them adding a Deep Space Nine book to the schedule is very exciting, because it means that, they are not sort of ruling out kind of doing some of those other shows as well. So maybe we will get another Voyager novel beyond just Kirsten Bayer's last Voyager relaunch novel, which is coming out next month. Actually, it's coming out this month. And maybe we'll get an Enterprise novel as well. I mean, I think this is an exciting development for fans who are hoping for books beyond just the kind of TOS, TNG staple kind.
Agreed. And I think that this ties a lot in with the fact that Lower Decks is getting such a positive reception. Lower Decks itself probably wouldn't translate well into a book because of the format and because so much of it is visual. But it really is a love letter to this time period of Trek. So I think people are rediscovering their love of the TNG through Voyager era and remembering a lot of things because of Lower Decks. So this is the perfect time for those novels that are set in that era to come out and kind of fill that desire that people have after they've remembered how much and why they love those times.
Much to look forward to, and I'm hoping we will hear about additional novels very soon, including, I hope, a next Picard novel, because it, at this point, it's going to have been a year between Star Trek Picard novels since The Last Best Hope came out in February. It's already October. Even if they announce one very soon, it probably would be early 2021 before it was out. So hopefully we hear a little bit more about those books as well.
Fingers crossed.
Well, after the postponement of Destination Star Trek Germany to next year, Massive Events, who also organize the Destination Star Trek London event, have announced that too will not take place in 2020. The new dates for Destination Star Trek London will be November 12th to 14th, 2021, and it is expected to keep its focus on the 25th anniversary of Star Trek Voyager. It is sad that another major event from the Star Trek fan calendar has now disappeared for 2020, but given the resurgence of COVID-19 currently being experienced in the UK, perhaps it is for the best. Meanwhile, here in the United States, Star Trek Las Vegas is still scheduled for its new December date, though not entirely set in stone. Creation Entertainment founder Adam Malin indicated in an interview earlier this week that the current plan was for the convention to move ahead. Make of that and Creation's dismal attempt to let us know what its safety protocols will be for Star Trek Las Vegas, what you will. Abby, do you think Star Trek Las Vegas should be going ahead this year?
No, that's the short answer is no. It's not safe yet. And I would hate for people to feel at all conflicted about going and celebrating something they love and keeping themselves and the people they love safe. So things need to be postponed until we can do that correctly. And we need to know before we go in that we are going to be safe. And as disappointing as it is, it's the right thing.
I've talked about this on previous shows, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but I feel like Creation have entirely mishandled this. I mean, I understand the very difficult situation that they find themselves in, around contracts and force majeure, et cetera, right? We'll take all that as read. But just their absolute inability to communicate to their customers in a way that acknowledges in any way the current environment. Like they sent around an email a couple of weeks ago advertising yoga classes with Mary Chieffo.
Yeah, I saw that.
Does that sound safe in December in the middle of a global pandemic to be around a bunch of people sweating and puffing inside some Las Vegas, ballroom. Like, I think that sounds like the last thing that anybody should be doing.
Yeah, it's very tone deaf.
It's so tone deaf. They are advertising these yoga classes with Mary Chieffo, but at the same time, their website, when it talks about what their COVID-19 safety protocols will be, are like, well, we'll figure it out closer to the time based on what the advice is from the Nevada state government, which to my mind is, we wish to get away with the least we absolutely possibly can do. And so we're hoping that things will get better so that we don't have to do more stuff. Whereas, I mean, this pandemic has been going on now for, 6 months. We know what it takes to do events. We know what it takes to do them safely. Frankly, we shouldn't be doing them at all, but we do know that if we are going to do them, what is necessary in order to do so. And for them to say we're still 2 months out, that they're in wait and see mode, in my mind is absolutely unacceptable, because they know what it's going to take, and they should just if they're really planning on doing this, they need to take all of the safety precautions necessary, not try and scrimp and save and get away with the least that they possibly can, because people will get sick. And they have said in their ticket policy, right, it was one of the first things they updated, was their ticket policy to say that if you purchase a ticket and if you attend STLV, you can't hold Creation liable for getting COVID while you're there. I mean, to my mind, that tells you everything you need to know about how this company is thinking about Star Trek Las Vegas. And while I'm sure that Adam and Gary are fundamentally good people, they have entirely mismanaged the situation. They have entirely mismanaged their approach to this convention. And there is no doubt in my mind that Star Trek Las Vegas should not be going ahead. And because of their handling of this situation, I'm firmly of the belief that Creation Entertainment should not continue to keep their license for Star Trek conventions going forward. I mean, it's absolutely unacceptable.
It just feels so cavalier and so rude, flat out rude, because it's not considering people as people, it's considering people as money.
Correct.
As customers. And while there are plenty of other institutions and businesses and everything doing that, you like to think that anything that has to do with Star Trek has a more enlightened idea and philosophy, but sometimes I guess everybody's a little bit like a Ferengi.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always been this thing about like, oh, Creation, just in it for the money, blah, 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 nickel and dime you here, there, and everywhere. And I mean, there's a certain amount of truth to that. But, that was around silly things like autographs and photo ops, not around you potentially catching a life-threatening disease while you're listening to, an actor talk about their experiences on a show from 50 years ago, and for that actor themselves to expose themselves. I mean, William Shatner's on the guest list. There are a number of guests who are on this list who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Frankly, everybody who was in 90s era Star Trek, is now entering a high-risk age category. In addition to me feeling really bad about this because of the paying customers attending, I also feel bad about this from the perspective of the actors and the guests who are attending. They have to interact with hundreds, sometimes thousands of people over the course of a day. And all it takes is one of them to have COVID-19 and not know it. And all of a sudden, that actor is putting themselves at serious risk. And so in addition to the safety protocols for folks like you and I want to know what the safety protocols are for folks like William Shatner and for Nichelle Nichols and Walter Koenig and, some of these other actors who are signed up to appear.
Agreed. And you know what? As someone who doesn't get to a lot of conventions anymore because of family reasons, I've been doing a lot more with the virtual conventions that have been going on this year. And I feel like I have done more to expand my Star Trek community and see more panels and interact with more things than I've been able to do before. So this could be a fantastic opportunity, even if it's still a paid kind of thing, for Creation to take Star Trek Las Vegas and make it into something that's appropriate and safe for now, but still accessible and possibly more accessible to the fans. It would take a lot of behind the scenes work. It would take a lot of pivoting, but that's what the world is demanding right now, and it could be done if they desired to.
All right, well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Abby, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
All right, so I was thinking about how I should have some sort of big, grandiose theory or thought, but really, since Lower Decks started, I have been turning this little nugget over in my mind, and I decided it was perfect for today. My theory, my hope, my wish, any of the above, is that whether it be in the season finale of Lower Decks this coming week or in season 2, that we are going to see a storyline in Lower Decks revolving around self-healing stem bolts.
All right, tell me more.
It's such a fun little deep cut to way back to DS9 and Jake and Nog trying to get rid of these self-sealing stem bolts. And it's come up in so many other ways here and there, and it's such an in-joke with people who know the franchise. It seems like the absolute perfect little nugget for Lower Decks to grab onto and actually show us what they look like or tell us what they do, or maybe they're on the hunt for, a case of them. And I think it would just be one of those things that the casual fan would be like, oh, that's interesting. And the deep cut fans would be, that's fantastic. So I'm really hoping they pick up on that like they have on so many other little nuggets throughout this first season.
Yeah, the self-sealing stem bolt is the ultimate in sort of Lower Decks concepts that predate Lower Decks and exist in the main shows, right? I mean, because it's this patently absurd in-joke that runs through the entirety of the show that is funny and is one of those real kind of winking, deep cuts to the folks who have watched every episode. And, you get there's the one episode where, the No J consortium and it's Jake and Nog and, they end up buying this bunch of self-sealing stem bolts and nobody has any idea what it is. But then they sort of show up again repeatedly in the remainder of Deep Space Nine. So yeah, I think, it's perfect fodder for Lower Decks to have some fun with that. Maybe even finally tell us what a self-sealing stem bolt does.
Exactly. Or maybe it's Rutherford coming up with 1,000 things to do with the self-sealing stem bolt. That would be kind of the opposite, yet the perfect companion to the joke that had run in DS9.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that'd be fun. All right, so my theory is also a Lower Decks theory, and it relates to, I guess, at the point people are hearing it's this week's season finale for the show. So my theory is there is going to be a big guest appearance on the Lower Decks season finale.
Ooh.
I have no idea who. I have no idea under what circumstances. But we've had 9 episodes now. Throughout the run-up to the show, Mike McMahon was really strongly hinting at legacy character appearances in Lower Decks. And, he sort of had said, they would be used sparingly, that they had to be in the right circumstances. But thus far, over 9 episodes, we've only had one, which is the cameo by John Delancey as Q in Veritas, which was a fabulous cameo and very well handled.
Agreed.
And, just absolutely delightful. But I would be shocked if we get to the end of the season and that's the only legacy character appearance, given how much he sort of, hyped it up. I think that in the season finale, there's going to be some kind of legacy character. As I say, I have no idea who, I have no idea what, but it would kind of it would sort of finish off the season in a way that makes all of the pre-hype up to the show make sense. You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
In that it was talked about a lot. McMahon sort of said yes a lot, and we haven't really seen it yet. So really the only place left to see it is in the season finale. So Abby, I guess this might be the last time. I've asked this question to a lot of folks over the last few months, and this might be the last time I get to ask it. But who do you think you'd want to see if there is a big legacy character in the final episode?
Oh, that's a really hard question because my first instinct would be everybody and anybody.
Right.
But that's not really very likely, though they could do something like they did, Family Guy style and have just a quick cut to the bridge of a ship with a whole bunch of people at once, which would leave me in a puddle of happy goo. But I kind of have a feeling maybe it would be the Doctor from Voyager, because the EMH has so much potential to be in different places. And I know that Robert Picardo is still very involved with the franchise and has done a lot of voice work before, so maybe it's him.
There's lots of possibilities, and the preview for the episode really didn't give away a massive amount of what the storyline will be, and so, I think it really could be anything, anyone, anytime, but we don't have to wait very long to find out, and then that will be season 1 of Lower Decks in the books.
Oh, that will be a good thing and a not a good thing. I'm thrilled every time we get a new episode, but it feels like this season has just flown by.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Abby Sommer, for joining me today. Abby, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
On Twitter, you can find me at Abby M. Sommer. That's SOMMER. That's the best way to get me.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander C. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Abby. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.